I'm Maggie. Welcome to Experiments in Crafting. Tonight I've got a couple of project updates and a couple more balls of yarn coming from the Birlinn Yarn Company in Scotland. So I had ordered some yarn for a project that I was working on, and I misread. Well, I ordered it before I picked the pattern, and then I misread the pattern when I picked it out and thought that I had enough. And I was one ball short, and so I had to order a little bit more. And since I was ordering more, I ordered even more. And so I've got a few of those to open up and show you. And then a couple of projects that I've been working on that I've got a few little updates on. And then, as always, questions that you guys have. So if you have yarn questions or crochet questions or anything like that, you want some recommendations, whatever, throw those in the live chat and we'll talk about them while we're streaming. Looks like a couple people saying hello. Welcome. Thank you for joining me tonight. And I guess I'm going to go ahead and get started and show you a handful of things I'm working on. So I showed this last week. This is about the same place that I left it last week because I haven't really worked on it. But this is the start to a cowl. And I know it doesn't really look like a cowl, but the idea here is that you make 10-inch loop and then you loop it over like this and then you work around the whole thing. And then this loop becomes 1/2 of the join, basically. So on the other side, you work a similar loop and you loop it through and sew it. And so what you end up with is 2 loops interlocked like this. And then the cowl is sort of made out of the rest of it. So it's something like this. It's a complicated shape, but it doesn't look horrifically difficult to actually make. So this end is this dark blue, and then I'm going to mix it in with a light gray. And then it's kind of like a mosaic crochet. The name of the cowl is Fastnet. So you can find that on Ravelry. It is a paid pattern, but it's a cool mosaic pattern. So this is the yarn that I picked was from the Birlinn Yarn Company in the Outer Hebrides, Scotland. And so I got a little bit more of that because I was one ball short. Let me see if I can figure out how to open this. Just open it out of the center, I guess. Let me get that out of the way. Okay. So, it was interesting because in the time that I ordered this yarn and then I had to go back and order again, the vendor had changed dye lots. But there was a little note on the website saying that if you really needed one out of the old dye lot, that you could still get it. And so I should double check and make sure that I got the right dye lot. And I did. So the way that this vendor indicates dye lots is just by a little dot on the tag. And so on the website, there was a note that they had switched to, I think, blue dot dye lot, and if you needed a ball of the pink dot dye lot, that you could get it. So she did send the right one and was really nice to work with and whatnot. So I've got that, and then I did get a couple more balls of yarn just while I was on there. So this is interesting because this is one of the non-dyed yarns. This is a natural color. The Hebridean, or however you say that, sheep are actually this dark brown color. And to get some of the grays that they have, they just mix it with there was another kind of sheep, which I'm failing to remember, that produces a white wool. And so they mix this dark black brown with the white to get the different grays. I've got some of the gray in my basket as well. So this is the gray wool. And if you picture mixing this with white wool, you'd get something like this. So this one is more white than it is black. And then there is a gray that's like in between here that is a darker gray, which is more black than white. and then you can get all the way down to white. So it's interesting though, because this to me feels quite a bit softer than the mixed colored ones. I think that this sheep is probably a slightly softer, or not really softer, but yeah, I guess softer is the right word, but it's that there's no pokey fibers. So the thing that makes the fibers sort of pokey is like the like diameter of the actual wool before it's spun, and this feels like it's a little bit finer. It's the reason that like merino wool feels so amazing, or like baby alpaca, because it's super, super fine. And then if you get into coarser wools, they feel more like people think wool feels. These ones have just a little bit of scratchiness to them, where you can feel some of the fibers are a little bit pokey. And then, you know, this feels just a little bit like it's a little bit finer, finer fiber. So, the yellow one feels more like the gray. I think the scratchiest of them is the blue. And then this orangey one, yellow, whatever color this is, I guess it's really orange, feels more like the gray and the brown. The brown feels, I think, the best. Then maybe the orange, then the gray, then the blue, I think, in that order. I'm guessing that is in order of how much white wool is mixed in. So this one, you can see there's quite a bit of brown tone, probably from the natural brown yarn. This one has quite a bit of white mixed in, and this one was probably mostly white before it got dyed blue, is my guess. I don't know that for sure, but just based on feeling them, I definitely like the brown the most. And it could all be in my head, who knows? But that's my gut feeling here, is that the brown is slightly softer, and I would bet that the white one is slightly coarser. So I don't know what I'm going to do with these, but they were kind of a pretty fall palette. Kind of all nice together, and the orange was on sale, and so I just went ahead and got it. So again, this is from the Birlinn Yarn Company, and I just kind of happened across them. For anybody who's a Call the Midwife fan, they released the new episodes to Netflix, and I watched them all. And the Christmas special from last Christmas, they traveled to, you know, the Outer Hebrides of Scotland, and so then I was kind of looking around at what kind of wool I could get from there, and that's how I stumbled across all of this. So it was mostly just me watching TV while I was crocheting, and ended up buying more yarn. So let's see. Val joined and said hello, welcome, thank you for joining. Also said that she loves my cowl. I assume she means this one, not the one that I'm partly working on. This one is, I never remember the name of this pattern, but the yarn is from 3 Irish Girls, and it is called Rocket Man. Jean also likes the cowl and says the yarn is gorgeous, the brown is lovely. It is really a very pretty brown. Very, very deep, like chocolatey color. It would actually look really nice with this blue. I might have to reconsider. So I intended to make the cowl with these 2 colors. But I could be convinced that this is a better choice. I'm not sure. So I'll have to think about it. I haven't gotten to the part where I have to add a second color in. But I do really like this brown. I don't think I like the blue and the orange as much together. I probably will stick with the blue and gray together because I don't really like the orange and gray together. So if I'm going to do something in 2 colors, I probably would prefer the orange and the brown together and the blue and the gray, but that's not a bad color combination. So I had a little bit of thinking to do there, but I have been very happy with this. But like I said, it is a coarser wool. It's if you're used to working with like a merino, it doesn't feel like merino. It does feel like it's going to be incredibly warm. So I think it's going to be super, super warm. Even though I'm not doing the center single crochet, I think I talked a little bit about that last week, where I explained why I believe that center single crochet is terrible. It really just was not working for me, and so I gave up and did single crochet, and I don't think I mind how it's turning out at all. But it's so dense, like there's actually quite a bit of holes, and you still can't see like anything through it at all. Just because there's enough hair kind of taking up the holes. It just looks relatively solid. So it's one of the things I hear people say, like when they see crochet versus knitting, that they don't like the holes as much. And I think a lot of times that's just the individual thing that you're making. It is harder to hide the holes in crochet, but it just doesn't matter with that yarn. It's kind of puffing up to fill the gaps. So that's one of the projects that I'm working on is that cowl, and with that yarn, now that I've got enough of it, I can finish it off. Well, I'm not far enough to need that additional ball to be the thing limiting me from finishing it off. Another project that I finished, I showed this, I think, last week, and was showing that I still had some work to do to finish off the ends on this cowl. But this is the Dottie cowl. I think this is a free pattern. And it's a reversible pattern. So on this side, it's mostly the pink, red speckled yarn with blue dots. And then on this side, it's mostly blue with the pink, red speckled dots. So, I really love this cowl. I just think it looks so cool. And it's just really unique and super solid and so squishy. It's also really heavy. So it's not quite 200 grams because I stopped a little bit short and made some fingerless gloves, but it's probably 150 gram cowl, which is pretty hefty cowl. So this one that I'm wearing that's kind of open and lacy is bigger, like taller. But it is, I think, probably only about 90 or so grams. I don't think I used even the whole ball. But yeah, I was happy to get this done. I've actually worn it this week. It got pretty chilly here. So, I wore this week, and I need to finish the fingerless gloves that go with it. They're in this bag. So I've got one glove done, and I need to finish the other. And I wish I hadn't stopped in the middle, but I did. So I have to figure out how I made this glove. But the glove is reversible except for the cuff. So I've got the blue side out, and it can be pink side out with the blue dots, but the cuff is pink speckle regardless. So that is my cowl and cuff set. Let's see. Jean says the brown might be able to stand on its own, that it's nice. Val likes the blue and the gray. Jane says that the blue and the dark brown look good together. So yeah, I think Chad is as torn as I am. I like the blue and the brown. I like the blue and the gray. I agree the brown could probably be all on its own. It'd probably make a really nice hat in that color. And then Jean says she can't get over how pretty my cowl is with this color shirt. I don't wear a lot of red normally, mostly because it doesn't, honestly, it just doesn't match my hair very well. My hair's a lot of cool colors, and I always feel like red doesn't go, and then I just decided I didn't care. And so I picked this out. I've been wearing it, and like this is one of the only cowls that I own that has even like little speckles of the same color. So it's what I like this morning. So thank you, and I'm glad that you agree that that I made a decent choice this morning. The Jean's asking which stitch the cowl is made in. I'm not sure if she's talking about this one or this one. The one on the table is it's like a layered V-stitch. I don't think it has a name. Like I said, the name of the pattern is Dottie. And it's a relatively complicated stitch to get started, but it's not impossible. So the first 4 rows are the hardest part, and then once you get the first 4 rows down, the rest goes easily. So it's just a 4-row repeat, but the problem is that you have to work 1 row, and then you have to sort of tip that row over and work behind it, and then you have 2 rows of V's, like situated like this. So you've got you've got double crochets with chains in the middle, and you've got 2 of them. So instead of working on top of each other, you work behind it. And then in the next row, you work through both sets. And so you sort of like link them together. And then the row behind that, you work behind it again. And so you make a second row of double V's on top of the first row of double V's. So this is where you get to like ones layered on top. And that's how you end up with these like different colors back and forth in this really like heavy mesh. And so it's a really cool stitch that takes a little bit of setup and a little bit of getting used to. But I guess what I want to say is I found it to be a little bit of a challenge, and I really enjoyed it because I don't feel like there are that many patterns out there that I can't do. So something that's a little bit of a challenge is welcome, I guess. Not that I by any means like the best crocheter. It's just that it's often that like it's mostly that I just don't want to do the math to figure out how to shape something or do something like that normally. It's not a technique that I find challenging. To do a sweater or something, it's a lot of shaping, it's a lot of paying attention, but it's mostly, it ends up being single crochets or something like that. And this was, I guess, technically challenging. Like, I really had to pay attention and figure out how it was going together. And then after, a few repeats, it got a lot easier, but I still had to really kind of focus. I had so many ends to weave in on this because I stopped paying attention. I was watching Netflix or something and would crochet in front of or behind a color change and have to end up cutting my yarn because I couldn't carry it then. So it was a little bit more of a challenge than I guess I'm used to. So I really enjoyed working on this. And then I the fingerless gloves were not part of the set. I just kind of took what I knew about fingerless gloves and worked this flat. So you can see on the one that I'm not done with, all I'm doing here is I made a ribbed cuff and then I worked the pattern flat. And I found instructions on the pattern designer's website on how to work this flat instead of in the round. And it's pretty straightforward once you have the round done. But you can see a little bit here. What's that? Yeah. Yep, we're going to switch cameras so I can show a little bit. Let me move this cowl out of the way. But you can see I've got the one row here ready to work. And it's just V-stitches, so it's double crochets with chains in between. But now I'm ready to start this stitch, and you can see I've worked it into the gap between the V-stitches. And what it's doing on this side is you can see there's the little part that's going to poke through and be shown on the other side. And so on this side, it's just a V-stitch worked into the edge. A little bit hard to see what's going on. But basically, you tip this whole row over and you work along the top of the last row. But you're working into two sets of stitches here. So it's the top of the V on this side and the chain in between the stitches on this side. And you grab both of them and work across the whole thing while this is tipped out of the way. And then you end up with two rows basically like splayed apart, and on the next row you link them together. So you end up with like a set of V's like this. Well, you end up with them like this, and then you hook them together. So it's a pretty interesting pattern to work with. And then at the very end of this, I just folded this across and stitched down the edge, and that's how I made my fingerless glove. And all I did was skip the thumb hole, and then once I got to the bottom, I came back up and single crocheted around the thumb hole, just so that it, you know, has a nicer edge there and one side wasn't unfinished. So that is that. And it looks like my husband did put the link in for the Dottie Cowl. And then the last thing that I'm working on is yet another doll. I'm really enjoying working on them. I'm just about done with the other one. I just need to go back to the embroidery machine and finish up the eyes. Because we were making like machine embroidered eyes on felt or on fleece. And then I was going to sew them on, but they're not quite done. And that's because I was aiming to make like an anime style character with anime style eyes, instead of using the round black safety eyes. So this is a slightly different pattern than I was using before, and it calls for making a sock with a cuff and then the leg on top. And so I've got the one leg ready, and then I've got the sock, but I haven't done the cuff yet on this one, and a couple rows into the leg. So the cuff is intended to work after you get a few rows on here, so you can kind of work against something. So this is the name of the doll is, I think, Elin, E-L-I-N. I guess it could also be Ellen. And I'm struggling to remember the designer's name on the pattern. Yeah, Carla Viglucci. But she makes a lot of cute dolls, and they have excessive wardrobes, which I really like. So this pattern came with like a dress and a vest and jeans and a t-shirt and all sorts of things. And then I think I bought 2 of her patterns, and so I think I ended up with like, I don't know, 12 different pieces of clothing between the 2 of them that I can make. So I don't know, I think it's fun. But anyway, so that's what I've been working on. I've crocheted more in the last, I don't know, week or so than I have probably in the month preceding that, but I still don't feel like it's been very much, or that I'm making particular headway on any of these projects, but getting better. But yeah, so that's about all I've been working on. I don't know if you guys have questions or projects you want to update me about, or you know, questions about yarn or recommendations or anything like that. You can put those in the live chat, and we'll talk about those. I don't know if it makes any difference, but I have top chat over here rather than all chat. if that matters. Jean's saying how fun I think about the doll. I think the doll making is super fun. I like making the little clothes. I enjoyed um when I had friends' kids who were real little and they were into dolls. I enjoyed making. At first, it was Equestria girls' dolls, which were a little bit smaller and much thinner than Barbie dolls. And so I made them clothes because there wasn't anything like that you could buy additional outfits. And then when they got into American Girls, I made them American Girl doll clothes, and I always thought it was a lot of fun to just make little clothes. It goes quickly, and you can be excessively intricate. So you can put little buttons on tiny coats, and I don't know, I just think it's a lot of fun. Jean just wanted to say that she enjoys the format of the channel. It's the best. Well, thank you very much. I'm glad you're enjoying it. I would imagine you mean the live streams and just like the weekly chat back and forth. So, that's good feedback. Thank you. Anna's asking if I can share some of my favorite indie dyers. Well, my absolute favorite is going out of business, and that was Twisted Fiber Arts. They did primarily gradient yarns, and they just did a really phenomenal job. But let's see, who else do I really like? Fiber Optic yarns. They're another one that does gradient dyed yarns. And not that I only like gradients. Those are just the two that popped into mind first. Oh, Sock Obsession yarns I really enjoy. I've unboxed quite a bit of their yarn on other live streams that you can go back and pull off the channel, but it's they do primarily sock yarns. They do have some DK and worsted weight yarns, but a lot of just really good color combinations, and a lot of speckling and really bright, intense colors that I really like. Who else do we really like? Good For You, I buy quite a bit from when we're at yarn shows, but she doesn't distribute direct to she doesn't distribute directly to like people. She does most of her distribution through local yarn stores. So you can buy from her at craft fairs, or not craft fairs, but yarn shows, or from local yarn stores, but you can't just like go on a website and buy from her. I'm trying to think, who else do we get a lot of yarn from? There's Black Cat fibers that we see a lot, but I don't know that we've bought all that much, though I'm almost positive that this yarn is from them. Oh no, that's from the Knitted Wit. There are so many that we see at Honey Girl Farms has had some nice stuff that I've bought in the past. Trying to Yeah, I do really like Leading Men Fiber Arts. In particular, they have a 600 yard or 150 gram fingering weight BFL, which is Blue Faced Leicester. BFL is an interesting yarn because it's a little bit more coarse, like I was describing earlier. It's not quite as soft, but it just has absolutely beautiful stitch definition, which means that when you make something and you like see the stitches and how they look, they really just stand up and they're like really crisp. And you wouldn't think that that was a quality of the yarn so much as it is the pattern, but it's really the yarn. Where this yarn is very drapey and looks nice and is flowy, the stitch definition is not great. Like, laid here, you can't really even tell that this pattern, when pulled apart, is kind of like almost like a plaid, because the yarn just kind of collapsed on itself. So if I open this up, you can see that it's like a net, but it kind of just collapsed in on itself, and it still looks very nice, but it's not what I would call great stitch definition, or much structure to the yarn. But it is very soft and very drapey, and that's a different, style for the cowl. But Leaning Men fiber, has a lot of nice colors. But I really love the 100% BFL base that they have. One of my favorite shawls that I wear pretty regularly is a the 150 yards of BFL in a color called London Fog, which is kind of like a moody gray blue color. Mostly gray with just like a little bit of coolness. Let's see. Val's asking, oh, she just said that I make some really cute dolls and she loves my mermaid and the bunny. I already forgot about the bunny. It was a good reminder. I should check in on how the bunny's doing in her new home. I took that to the little girl that it was made for, and her mom asked her what she was going to name it, and she named it Dance Bunny. And so she's like, well, but it is a dance bunny, but it needs a name, and she was pretty insistent that its name was just Dance Bunny. I think they did settle on a name, but I bet it's called Dance Bunny. But she was super, super happy to have it. So, but thank you. And my mermaid's somewhere around here, probably in front of me in a bin. Jean's asking if I ever used any yarn from Kramer Yarns. It's a small company, and the yarn looks nice, but that's from a distance. I have used some yarn from Kramer Yarns. The local yarn store around here doesn't actually carry much in Kramer Yarns, but she does an anniversary sale, and a lot of times she'll get samples from her vendor. And then when she does the anniversary sale, you turn a little thing and you get a gumball, and it determines whether you get a discount or you can choose off the table. And I've chosen some pretty nice Kramer yarns in the past. In particular, they make a really nice sparkle yarn, which is an acrylic mixed with so you can do sparkles in two ways, and I've talked about this a bunch before. But you can do something called stellina, which is spun in with the fiber, and you can actually pick it out. It's like little bits of like sparkly bits that you can pull out. Or you can do something like, what is the name of that? It's Karen's Simply Soft Party, where instead of mixing it in with the fiber, they wrap it all the way around the yarn. And that is my least favorite way of getting sparkle into yarn. So they basically, when you make the yarn, they take a number of plies and like twist them together, and just one of the plies is the sparkle thread. And what happens is when you're working with that, a lot of times you drop it. So you'll pull just the yarn part and you'll miss the thread, or as you're working, the tension will be off and it'll like bunch all together. It's just not, it's not my favorite. So I really, really prefer the stellina type, and that's the kind that the Kramer yarn that I have has. So I made a pair of, I think, boot cuffs for my sister with the Kramer sparkle yarn. And then they had another line, I think, called Tapas, which had a very like Spanish flair to it. The yarn that I had was kind of a mint-ish green, maybe a little bit more seafoamy than mint. But it was mixed with like some rust tones, which I wouldn't have thought would have gone at all. But looked really cool. So, my husband was showing me the picture, but yeah, the Perfection Tapas, and the other one was some sort of Perfection Sparkle. But I have worked with the Kramer Perfection yarns. I don't think I've worked with anything else from them, but that doesn't mean I haven't. It's just all I can remember. For some reason, there's one other yarn I think that they make, and I can't place it. I can picture their logo, though, which is like a K, and it's multicolored or something. But yeah, that's all I can think of, and the yarn looked like it was good quality. If I remember correctly, it was still heavily acrylic, maybe with a little bit of wool in there, and I don't know if that matters one way or another to you. I like there to be a little bit of natural fiber in there, just for aid in blocking. The wool or cotton or, alpaca tends to hold a block a little bit better than 100% acrylic yarn.
Was it Perfection Lights?
It could be Perfection Lights. I think I've got a couple balls of it in my bin in there.
They're like 23%
23% merino. That's
23, 28,
depending on the color.
no, depending on like the line of Perfection.
Oh, okay. So it sounds like the Kramer yarns, the Perfection ones, are in the mid 20 range percent merino, and then probably the balance in acrylic or other, because usually Stellina is listed as other or metallic fiber. Sharon's saying she's using a Kramer chunky yarn, doing a felted crochet square blanket. How are you liking the Kramer chunky yarn? The felted crochet square blanket. So if you're felting it, is it a non-superwash yarn? Yeah. MAUCH is the line. Chunky. Yeah. Is that a non-superwash yarn for felting, or sometimes you can get a superwash yarn to felt, but I think it's quite a bit more challenge.
It just says 100% wool. It doesn't say.
Okay, so it says 100% wool, so it'll likely felt very nicely if it's just non-superwash.
Versus the chunky, which says it's merino wool and acrylic.
Yeah. So merino wool can be non-superwash, but it rarely is. It's such a... Let's see. Sharon says that it's nice, a bit rough, making a basket. It's 100% wool. Some reason I read it as blanket. She definitely said basket. So a felted wool basket makes much more sense than a blanket. But yeah, I would expect it to be a little bit rough because, oh yeah, it definitely looks non-superwash. I would expect it to be a little bit more rough because it still has the scale on the wool, which is what's going to allow it to felt. Wool naturally has like what looks like little dragon scales on the outside of it. If you look at it under a microscope, you can see these like scales. And when they superwash it, they basically like scour all that off of there. And it gets a lot softer, and then the scales are what allows it to felt. They like interlock and like make a mat, and that's really what you're doing is, you felt it usually like with needles or something, and you poke it, but then all those scales like mat themselves together and you get that felt look. And you can do that on accident just by washing and drying it, and they, rub all against each other. It's why you have to be really careful if you're not intending to felt it, to stop that from happening. You have to not move it almost at all because you don't want them rubbing against each other and locking against each other. But yeah, so I would expect it to be a little bit rougher than a super wash if that's what you're typically used to. But the same can sort of be said about the yarn that I got from the Birlinn Yarn Company. It's not superwash. So it is a little bit rougher and a little bit, I guess, oilier feeling, because it still has a lot of like the animal, like the lanolin on it, which is going to make it quite a bit warmer, but and quite a bit more waterproof. But also you can feel that on there. I always think that non-superwash yarn feels a little bit dirty to me. Like kind of like hair that is not like greasy, but just like a little bit more like it came off of an animal. Where merino wool, like superwash merino wool, might as well just be, I don't know, like a t-shirt that you bought. Like it's super soft and feels very clean. I always think that like this feels more like it came off of an animal. It also, like, I can smell the lanolin. It always smells a little bit more like a sheep. Like this still smells like sheep. So even though it's been washed and, well, that one hasn't been dyed, but even the dyed ones smell a little bit more like sheep. So, a lot of good questions though tonight. If you guys have more questions, I'm happy to keep going, and we can keep talking yarn and crochet and all that. Trying to look and see if there's anything else I have to talk about. I've been trying to think of more indie dyers that I really like. Yeah, fiber optic is one of my favorites. Most of you have seen my wedding shawl repeatedly. This shawl is also fiber optic. It's upside down. This one is also fiber optic. This still needs to be blocked. I should block this on stream or something. Though not tonight. But so but anyway, the thing that makes fiber optic particularly unique is that they offer end skeins to their gradients. So this gradient was this like sun yellow all the way out to purple. But the purple section of this, so you can see that like the orange is only a row or two. This gray brown transition is only a few rows. There's a couple rows of blue, and then it should only be a couple rows of purple, and it should end right here. And so that should be the whole shawl. What they let you buy is either end or both ends if you want, of the either end of the gradient. So you could have gotten a whole ball of this yellow or a whole ball of the purple. And so I went with a whole ball of purple. And so this is actually a 200-gram shawl instead of 100. And the first 100 ends all the way out here. But because it gets so big, the next 100 doesn't take up very many rows. But it adds quite a bit of length to the shawl. It doesn't seem like a whole lot, but if it ended all the way back here, you'd miss these few inches. And then when this gets blocked, this will go out quite a bit further, and make this, you know, a much larger shawl. So this still needs to be blocked. I need to wet it and stretch it, and let it dry. And there's a random piece of stellina in here. So this is what I was talking about with the fibers that you could pick out. I don't know what this came out of, because it wasn't this shawl, but just, you can get these little fibers. I need to stop moving it. Okay. But I don't know if you can see this little sparkly fiber that I've got, but this is the stellina. And they mix this right in with the rest of the fibers, and it's much softer, and it can't get away from you while you're working on it. And obviously you can pull the fibers out just like you could pull a wool fiber out of the shawl. But anyway, this is what I was talking about with the different types of sparkle. But anyway, Fiber Optic yarns has these different gradients, and you can, if you want, you can extend the gradient by buying the beginning or the end or both, and making a larger shawl out of it. You can also buy multiple gradients and like run them back to back and do things that people normally do. But this particular dyer is the only one that I know of that offers all their gradients with both end skeins. Let's see. Anna's asking if I've ever ordered from Expression Fiber Arts. I have. And Expression Fiber Arts makes nice yarn, and I would not say anything negative about the yarn, or the dyer, but I always found the photography on their website to be absolutely stunning, and their yarn by comparison was just a little bit underwhelming. Their photography is absolutely amazing and not inaccurate, but when it actually came to my house, I was like, ooh, I actually thought that was like way more intense than it ended up being. And it was still lovely and very well dyed, and I don't want to say anything negative, and I don't want you to think anything negative, but her photography is so good that the yarn had a hard time like holding up to the standard that was set, I guess, by the photography. So the yarn seems very, very nice. And I don't have anything negative to say. I don't actually know that I might have worked one project with Expression Fiber Arts, but I probably have 5 or 6 balls that I got on a good sale. But yeah, I don't have anything negative to say. It was just, like I said, I think the photography was so amazing that the yarn had a hard time living up to it. Not to say that it's not good stuff. Jane's asking if I've ever used Fiber Stash Dye Works. I don't think I am familiar with them, actually. Which is rather impressive, because I kind of felt like I was familiar with most dyers at this point. I mean, yeah, that's probably not true, but yeah, they're probably an East or West Coast dyer. We could probably look on their website. But I am not familiar with their work. Though it does look like they've got a bunch of pretty nice bright colors. I'm seeing mostly Connecticut and Vermont. Is that what I'm reading from here? New York. Okay. Sorry, I've got the hiccups. So, yeah. Oh, they have a mystery item.
It says when she tries new bases, she has to buy like 10 or 20 at a time. And so even if they don't make a yarn from it, she might have like one off with a weird base.
Yeah.
And sells those.
Okay, so that's interesting. What my husband was saying is, on the Fiber Stash Dye Works, she said that in order to try a new base, she's got to buy 10 or 15 of them, and then she'll dye those up and maybe decide that she's not going to turn that into a whole line of yarn. But now she's got 10 or 15 of the same thing dyed up. And so you can get a mystery yarn. And so sometimes she'll just send out, it looked like a pretty reasonable price. Yeah, $12 or $15, to just get sort of a one-off. You couldn't get more, and you couldn't get, like, she's not intending to turn it into a regular thing, but just kind of an interesting way to sample some weird yarns. Jean understands why we like Fiber Optic in particular. My husband's showing me more yarns from Fiber Stash. They're really intensely colored. So I have not tried them, but we might be trying them. There's some really cool purples and some speckled yarns in there. Jane's also saying that Fiber Stash is in New England. So yeah, a lot of times, well, we end up seeing a lot of vendors from the Midwest because that's where we're at. Some vendors are willing to travel much further than others. But there's not a whole lot of reason for a dyer out of New York to travel to Illinois because there's enough business in New York and Pennsylvania and Maryland. All have big fiber shows. You know, New York Sheep and Wool, Maryland Sheep and Wool, are all huge shows, and so there's probably not a whole lot of reason to travel this direction, where a lot of the Midwest vendors will travel to New York to hit those huge shows. So, we tend to see the same vendors quite regularly, and I try to get to new shows if I can, and try and get further away from home, if I can, so that we can see some new vendors because things tend to get a little bit samey. For example, we went to Stitches Midwest like several years in a row, and by about the third year, it was not interesting. Not that it wasn't still fun to go and shop, but it just was like, oh, yep, we saw them. They had the same yarn that they had last year. Yep, saw them last year. Pretty much the same thing. Oh, they might have 1 or 2 new colorways, but like it got old as far as selection in a lot of cases. But when we get to some of the smaller, like more specialized shows, those have a tendency to have more turnover because frankly some of the vendors are brand new, or some of the vendors no longer sell yarn anymore, and so like they have a little bit more turnover on some of the smaller attended shows. But also they tend to be a little bit more localized. So like YarnCon is a Chicago yarn show, and almost all of the vendors are somewhat local. And then Wisconsin Sheep and Wool tends to attract pretty local vendors. There's some exceptions, like Fiber Optic Yarns is out of somewhere in Ohio. I want to say Milford, but I don't even know if that's right. But they're out of somewhere in Ohio, and so they make the trip up to Wisconsin. But I guess what I'm saying is, if you can get to, once fiber shows are a thing again, if you can get to some local ones and then some of the bigger ones, you'll get like a different mix of vendors. So I would love to travel out to New York. New York Sheep and Wool is called something else now, I think. Allentown or something. Or I don't know. There's a couple of shows out there that like get reshuffled by name. But Maryland Sheep and Wool or one of the big shows out in the East Coast, I would love to get out and see. Let's see. Jean says that gets stale. I wish there could be more options right now. She's in a dark chocolate colored phase. So hard to find. Sock Obsession yarns. I just bought a dark chocolate. It actually, I think the name of the yarn is the chemical formula for theobromine, which is a component of chocolate, but it's a nice chocolatey brown. I don't know where it's at. It's somewhere over here, but I don't know where. Got it. See, I knew it was over here somewhere. So this is Sock Obsession yarns. This is a superwash merino, 65% superwash merino, 20% silk, 15% yak. And I like a little bit of yak in some of my fiber because it gives it that, like, it's kind of a hard to describe gray tone. So this is clearly chocolatey brown, but there's a dustiness to it that the yak just can't. I haven't seen it replicated quite the same way. Plus, the silk feels amazing. Jane is correct. It's called Rhinebeck. I knew it had a different name. And then Allentown is a separate one, like the next week in Pennsylvania. But anyway, Jean, this is C7H8N402, which is not a great name for a yarn when you're trying to look it up. But it is a dark chocolate brown from Sock Obsession Yarns. And if you, I don't know that she takes requests, but if you keep an eye on her website, I think she does updates every single Saturday. Though she might take requests if you message her on Instagram. It's a small dye house, so if she has things that people want, I'm sure she has a tendency to make those sooner. But yeah, this feels fantastic. I'm really enjoying just playing with it. The silk feels just so nice, and it's only 20% silk, which is not nothing, but it's just so soft. Helen is joining us. Thank you for joining us, and I'm glad that you caught us this time. We've streamed a little bit sporadically the last several weeks. It's been a really, really busy couple of weeks at work. We've added a lot of people, and there's lots of things going on, and it's just chaos, and it's getting better, but it's been a lot of exhausting weeks, and so there have been a couple where I've come home and I'm like, I just can't stream tonight. So I'm glad that you guys have stuck it out, and hopefully we are on track to stream regularly on Thursday nights. So yes. Oh, it is in stock on the single ply, or just a regular sock? Okay. So it I guess it is in stock on the 4-ply sock, which is a very nice yarn. Not this silk blend. This is the single ply yak base, but the sock 4-ply. I don't think it's lace weight. I think it's sock weight. No, it's sock weight. It's 120 grams, 523 yards. Single ply. This one's missing its tag.
They also have a darker or a lighter option.
What are you? This is the 4-ply sock weight. 100% merino. So this is the driftwood color, but you can see that the base is a quite nice. I don't know how well it shows up on your screen, but this is the 4-ply sock base, and it's really nice sock yarn. Just a really good squish to it. Versus the single ply yak yarn. So, oh, interesting. A lot of times, we'll pull up the website so he can see what it, or so I can see what he's seeing. So, and then we'll post a link so you guys can see what we're seeing. But the single ply means just that it's 1 ply. A lot of times it's a little bit less even, so you'll get thicks and thins in single ply. It's a bit more difficult to work with because if you pull really hard, it will just separate. Because all it is it's held together with 1 ply, and if you pull, they'll just come apart like this. So it's a little bit harder to pull your stitches out. It's a little bit harder to work really tight, or if you make something like a hat that has to be cinched at the end, you can get the ply will just separate sometimes. So it's a little bit tougher to work with, and then throwing the yak and silk in there makes it just a little bit, not more delicate, but just different to work with, I guess. Where a good solid 4-ply merino is going to be a bit of a workhorse. You can pretty much do whatever you want to it, and it's not gonna give, or it's gonna be a really strong, smooth. It's relatively like hairless, so you don't have like problems pulling your stitches back out, and it should be crazy strong. So there's reasons to go with both, but the yak, if I remember correctly, you've got to be a little bit more careful blocking too. It's alpaca blooms heavily. I'm trying to remember. Yak might be a little bit more delicate. I'd have to look back into that. But alpaca can be temperamental to block. A lot of times you'll block alpaca with spray blocking instead of wet blocking because it like poofs so much, and then when it poofs, it gets kind of weak. So because the fibers kind of get away from each other a little bit. So you got to be careful if you're wet blocking alpaca because you can kind of pull it apart. Well, I think that's really all I've got to show. If you guys have more questions, I'm happy to stick around for a little bit longer and talk more yarn and crochet things. But other than that, maybe I'll, if I don't have something else to share with you guys, I'll block this on stream next week, and we can talk more yarn and crochet things. So next week I'll likely stream unless something crazy comes up. The following week will be Thanksgiving, and so we'll have to see if we can either relocate the stream or if we'll just end up canceling it for the week. But we will not stream on Thanksgiving Day. But other than that, trying to think if there's anything else I've missed. I think that's about it. So, I guess I'll probably go ahead and wrap up for the evening. If you have questions or anything like that and you want to reach out to me, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Experiments in Crafting. Those locations, you'll also find updates like if we're going to cancel the stream or if we're going to relocate it to another day. The posts will show up on there. I've been doing a pretty good job of posting when we're canceling. Sometimes it's not till right before the stream, but hopefully if you're looking forward to the stream and it's not showing up, that you can find on Facebook, Instagram, or on the community tab of YouTube, that there will be a post there saying that either we're having technical difficulties or we're rescheduling. And then also on Facebook, there is a relatively small but friendly crochet group that if you find my page at Experiments in Crafting, then there's a little group to join, and people are pretty nice and sharing projects. And like I said, it's a relatively small group, but friendly. So if you want to share some of your projects, and we can kind of all look at projects and share advice and things like that. So, all that said, we do stream on Thursday nights at 8 p.m. Central Time. That 8 p.m. sometimes is 8:10 or 8:15, depending on how quickly we wrap up dinner and get things going and YouTube cooperates and any number of other things. But that's the general goal, is to be on at 8 o'clock on Thursday nights. And so thank you all for joining me and for all the good conversation and all the good questions this week. And I hope to see you all next week. And have a great weekend and rest of your week. Good night. Bye.